Sanbonani, molweni, dumelang, absheni, hello, siyanibingelela. Greetings to you all. We are here to ukuthi senze enye video, and before that we kindly ask, we would kindly like to thank you for your support that you've been showing the channel. Especially there have been people who've been following us since we started this YouTube channel, and they've been giving us their comments, their critiques and words of encouragement, and for that we are grateful. We are grateful for your support, and we ask that you may continue to support this channel, Le Nubian Exodus. And today we just want to share, probably like it's not going to be that long, but it's going to be very important, and it concerns the recent events that have been happening in the Middle East involving the nation of Israel and the Palestinians, involving Jews and the Palestinians. The reason why we want to do this video is because of the fact that whatever happens in Israel has an implication, in the church. Many of the Christians, are invested in what is currently happening in Israel, because some of them are interpreting as a sign of, fulfillment of biblical prophecies, and some have other various, theological and political agendas. In South Africa, we do have, various opinions with regards to this issue. The ACDP and the Patriotic Alliance, ACDP being so-called a Christian political party, and led by Reverend Mishwe, and the Patriotic Alliance led by Eusebius Mackenzie, which he also claims that he's a Christian, strongly believes, in Christian Zionism. They believe that, the Christian church in South Africa has to be on the side of Israel, because if you are not on that side, then you are, they view you as a person who is, on the wrong side of God. And we know with Christian Zionism is also big in the West, the especially America, which also translate to political, economic, and military support to Israel. People's tax monies, are taken and to go fund, Israel. Also, one of my friends, we're just talking about this thing. He said that he used to believe that if he supports, a Jew, he talks kindly, about about Jews. God was going to somehow, benefit him in a financial way, because God given, when God said to Abraham that he would bless anyone who blesses him and curse anyone who curses him. So, and that type of prophecy is huge in many of the churches. That type of belief is huge in many of the churches, especially within the charismatic circles, who unconsciously support Christian Zionism, even though many of them are not even aware what that is. So what we want to deal with right now is the fact that the land, which some call Israel, some call Palestine, doesn't belong to the Jew, doesn't belong to the Jews. The land that right now we are talking about doesn't belong to the Jews. even from the beginning, the land originally did not belong to the Jews. The land belonged to the Canaanites. Those are the indigenous people of that territory. It was taken from the Canaanites by God and given to the Jews. And they are being given that land. The stipulation was that they have to maintain covenant faithfulness. They have to be faithful to Yahweh, and then Yahweh is going to allow them to stay in that land, to which covenant unfaithfulness led to their being exiled from that land. And they are being exiled from that land. God will raise up, men, prophets, and prophesy that they are going to be brought back into that land. And he will even tell them of the time that he was going to do so. First, we know of the Assyrian captivity of the northern tribes, and then we know of the Babylonian captivity, of Judah, and we know later on that the Jews, around AD 32 to AD 36, after the Bar Kokhba revolt, the Romans chased the Jews out of that land. And that happened because of their covenant unfaithfulness. Right now, in the entire Bible, the Jews are only going to be brought back when the Davidic ruler comes back. They are only going to be brought back when the Davidic ruler comes back. The creation of the state of Israel in 1948 by Theodor Herzl, who was an atheist, in fact, the father of modern Zionism, who sort of like came up with the idea of a Jewish state and address the Rothschilds, those people who were the bankers, evil people. Theodor Herzl, who was also an atheist, something that is very contradictory about this is the fact that you have an atheist, Theodor Herzl, who seek to create a Jewish state. Then this atheist uses what the Bible promised to the people of Israel, to then carry out this godless political idea of a Zionist, of Zionism. It's a godless political idea. A person who does not believe in God but wants to use the Bible to promote his colonialist agenda. So what happened is that after the Bar Kokhba rebellion or Bar Kokhba revolt, which took place in the 2nd century, the Jews were chased out of the land. And then they were scattered, all over. Many of them went to Europe. And then there in Europe, they worked and then they became sort of like bankers. And then they started, with this usury thing, charging interest on money borrowed. And then people started becoming suspicious of the Jews. If you can even read the early church fathers, they had certain things to say, about the Jews. And to such an extent, if you can look at them, it's not like these church fathers were wrong. There were problems that the Jews were doing. And also in Germany, it was the very same thing. We know of, the so-called anti-Semitism of Martin Luther, the leader of the Protestant Reformation, who bashed the Jews, because of this this practice of usury, and now there were widespread persecution in Europe, because in Europe that's where anti-Semitism was born. There were widespread persecution of Jews, and which escalated in the time of the Nazis with Hitler, killing close to 6 million of the Jewish people, as they say. And then because of the persecutions which were happening as early as in the Middle Ages, you had Jews being persecuted there. And in the late 1800s, Theodore Herzl, seeing all of that, he sort of like come up with an idea of a Jewish state, and he addressed himself with the Rothschild, who then, worked with other, first of all, they first rejected the idea, but later on, worked with other people, to then create the State of Israel, which was created after World War II in 1948. And in its creation, they went to Israel, and then they removed the people who were already there, in Israel, claiming that this is our land and all of that. So these were the European Jews who did that. So right now, what is currently happening in Israel is a result of that. And the Bible is then perverted and used to support that genocidal state, which is now called Israel. And now the problem with that is that the church, for most part of the Christian church, they believe that we have to support what Israel is doing. We don't have to speak bad about Israel, because that's inviting God's judgment upon us. As South Africans, as Christians who are in South Africa, we really need to be speaking about this, because when we in South Africa were oppressed by the apartheid government, the Palestinians supported our cause. The Jews, Israel, was busy supporting the apartheid government to kill our ancestors. And right now, we really can't just be quiet, when we see what Israel is doing to the Palestinians. And we need to come at that from a biblical perspective. Now, from a biblical perspective, we know that the Bible prophesied that the Jews were going to be exiled. Which is, we had the Assyrian exile, the Babylonian exile, and then later on the Romans, who in the 2nd century chased the Jews out. And according to the Bible, the Jews are only going to receive their land back during the millennium reign of Christ. That's the 1,000-year period where Christ is going to come and establish himself in Jerusalem. He's going to sit in the Davidic throne, thus, we know from 2 Samuel chapter 7, verses 12 to 17, where God makes a covenant with David that is going to raise a seed via David, and that seed is going to sit on his throne forever. And we know in the book of Matthew, Christ is traced, as that seed of David. He is the King of the Jews. And we know from Isaiah chapter 11, the fact that when Christ was on this earth, he did not fulfill what was promised in Isaiah chapter 11. That's the progressive dispensationalist view, that the promises which were made in the Old Testament to ethnic Israel are still going to be fulfilled in the future millennium period to ethnic Israel. We don't take the replacement theology or supersessionist view that now the church is the new Israel, and therefore the promises which were made to Old Testament ethnic Israel are then fulfilled in the New Testament church. We don't take that position. We still believe that the people of Israel are still the people of Israel, and the promises which were made to them in the Old Testament are still going to be fulfilled to them in the future millennium kingdom when Christ established his rule on earth, sitting on David's throne and fulfilling what we see in Isaiah chapter 11. So right now what the Jews are currently doing is unbiblical. There's no biblical support whatsoever in that creation of 1948, by the Allies, the British, because, there was a lot of Christian Zionists within the British Allies, and the British in 1923 conquered Palestine, which used to previously belong to the Ottoman Empire, and from there, worked towards the creation of the modern Jewish state with the help of the banking dynasties, the wicked banking dynasties, families such as your Rothschild, to create the modern state of Israel, which is an unbiblical entity. That state is unbiblical. They are not doing anything from which the Bible endorses. What they were supposed to do was just to come to the land and live just like, the people whom they found there, instead of trying to claim that this is their land. They were chased out of that land because of their covenant unfaithfulness. And in the New Testament, they rejected their Messiah. And because of the rejection of that Messiah, they were then punished by God and sent to exile. They are only going to be returned back to that land in the millennium reign of Christ, which we found in Revelation chapter 20. The idea that now what they are currently doing has to be supported by the Christian church is flawed and completely wrong. The Bible doesn't endorse the current state of Israel. It's an atheistic, anti-biblical and perverted state. You look at people such as your Netanyahu, that's a wicked man. That's an evil man, as of today, when we speak as of today, over 60,000 Palestinians have died, most of them being women and children, because of what the Jews are currently doing in the state of Palestine. What the people such as your Netanyahu, are currently doing there in Israel. They even went as far as attacking their neighbor Iran, because they don't want them to have nuclear weapons. But the very same state has its own nuclear weapons. They don't want others to have, nuclear weapons, because they want to bully that whole region. And the church is then forced to support that immorality and wickedness. So if one is a Christian and you currently support what Israel is currently doing in Palestine, therefore you are outside of God's will. You are there is definitely no biblical justification for one to support the nation of Israel. So right now, the land, which we now call Palestine, or which we can call Israel, doesn't belong to the Jews. The Jews were chased out of that land because of covenant unfaithfulness. So the land doesn't belong to them. They should not be claiming, the promises of God, whilst on the other side, they hate God. They are ungodless. They even hate the Messiah. And the idea that it is only, the European Jews, because largely it's the European Jews who are there, and they don't even want Jews from other parts of the world. We have Jews in Africa, we have Jews in other parts of Asia. No, they don't want those Jews. They only want themselves as the Ashkenazi Jews to be the ones who are running stuff there, and they push everyone outside, because they believe that they are the ones who have to be at the top there. And even, there are even other people who are even doubting if these people are Jews. They are even doubting if these people are Jews, because many of them have European fathers. They might European, or many of them have European ancestry. You have, because remember, when the Jews were chased out by the Romans in the 2nd century, after the Bar Kokhba revolt, they went to Europe, and in Europe they mixed, with many people, the various, European clans and tribes and nations, and many of them, because there's this thing that in Israel we are not even allowed to take a DNA test, because they know that many of them are not Semitic. That is within the Ashkenazi Jews. We are not even sure, which of these 12 tribes of Israel do these people belong to. They themselves don't even know. They themselves don't even know. So now the idea of them being arrogant, but we know that God knows which one belongs from where. The idea of them being arrogant, with those European fathers, that some of them have, German fathers, British fathers, Irish fathers, and all of that. You have a person who has had maybe a grandmother, who was Jewish, maybe from the mother's side, and then a European father, and then because of, since this Jewish identity which was created just after the world wars, now those elites are coming in, supporting it, and all of that. All of a sudden the person comes in and claims the identity of his great grandmother, maybe on the mother's side, and then leaves the fact that his father is a European. The person is European, he's not a Jew, he's European. You only have probably a Jewish great grandmother, so don't claim to be a Jew. So that's some of the reason why others even doubt the fact that some of these people are Jews, but they are so arrogant. In South Africa, they wanted to help the apartheid state to destroy and kill our ancestors. There were declassified files where it showed that they were working, colluding with the very same apartheid state and helping it to create those nuclear weapons, which they were going to use them on our ancestors who were fighting for their freedom, fighting for their land, fighting for their liberation. So you can't just expect South Africa to then come and support Israel. Also, supporting Israel is not biblical. South Africa did well taking the Jews, the state of Israel, into the ICJ, on the genocide case. South Africa did very well there in doing so, because that's justice. That's standing up for those who can't stand up for themselves. That's speaking for those who are voiceless, who do not have a voice. South Africa did a very good job there, and I so wish that South Africa will continue dealing with the Jews, with the state of Israel. Lately they also came here to our neighbors, in Lesotho, creating division between brothers because of what South Africa was doing to them in taking them into the ICJ on the genocide case. So these people, they go around creating problems. They go around creating problems and act as the victims. And that's not what the Bible is revealing here. If really these Jews were people of the book, people of God, people of the Bible, they're not going to be doing that to the Palestinian children, Palestinian women. They die of hunger. They are killed, trying to get food. They are being destroyed by this state led by Netanyahu, who is a warmonger and a person who is very evil. So Christians should not be supporting that. Christians should not be supporting that. The scriptures are clear. The Jews were removed from that land. They will only be brought back in the millennium kingdom, where Christ is going to gather all the Jews, not only the Ashkenazi Jews who are there, but all the Jews, He's going to gather them from the various nations, and then he brings them back into his saving knowledge, and is going to redeem them. So right now, Jews do not own that land. That land from the get-go did not belong to them. They were given it to it by God, on the grounds that they have to maintain covenant faithfulness. They failed, they were driven off, and they are only going to be brought back in the millennium reign. So the creation of the state of Israel in 1948 was an unbiblical project. The church doesn't have to support it. We don't have to support this creation, which finds its origin in an atheist by the name of Theodore Herzl. We don't need to be supporting that. You have the Balfour Declarations, which was addressed to the Rothschild family, and a very wicked family, which was also behind the funding of Cecil Rhodes in South Africa. The very same guy who made sure that British colonialism, white supremacy in South Africa becomes hegemonic. Those are the type of people we are dealing with. And if now the church continues to support such people, therefore it reveals to be on the side of evil and wickedness. I hope that this video benefits you, and if you have more that you want to ask, and certain disagreements that you might have, it's fine. You can offer them, and then we shall engage you on them. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you have a great day and a great week. God bless you.